جلستنا الخامسة التي تبدأ بعد لحظات تتحدث عن الذكاء الاصطناعي والمستقبل الإنساني الروبوتي.
Our fifth session for the day will discuss artificial intelligence and the future of human-robot coexistence. Will artificial intelligence be a threat or opportunity to mankind?
نعم، السؤال الأكبر هو الذي ربما سيتحدث أو يتحدد في الجلسة: هل الذكاء الاصطناعي يشكل تهديد أم فرصة للبشرية؟ ندعو للمنصة لين شومان، مذيعة وصحفية متخصصة في هذا الشأن أو الشأن الاقتصادي، لتدير الجلسة، فلتتفضل.
Please welcome Lynn Schumann on stage to moderate this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies, gents, and robots. Not sure if there are more robots with us today, but I wouldn't be surprised. Honestly, it feels a bit awkward. You're smiling. That's even more awkward, overwhelming, I would say, and that's what the session today is about. It's about coexisting with robots, but with machines in general. You know, like today, it's very normal for machines to make our coffee. It's very normal for machines to manufacture our clothes or cars. But soon enough, and it's actually happening now, but like not on a commercial scale, soon enough, they will be making decisions for us. Of course, this would be very helpful because they would actually give us more time to focus on creativity, on things we like. But it would also be very critical because they'll be our doctors, because they are going to represent us in court, because they are going to make our investment decisions. So it's a lot of things to actually absorb. So how to go from this point, actually, what attitude to take when thinking of coexisting with machines? On the one hand, we don't really want to be over jolly, over positive, and get stuck with the, oh my God, that's so cool, because honestly, it is so cool. Everything, like the speed and the presence is overwhelmingly good and is actually helping progress to go exponentially. We're talking about the Moore's curve of this technological advance that's going and running super quick. So that's on one hand. But on the other hand, we don't want to be, as they say, negative Nancy's. We don't want to be pessimistic. We don't want to fall in the trap of this conspiracy theory that basically scares us about robots taking over or the new apocalypse. So how should we think about that? That's what I'm going to try to do with my panelists, my respected panelists, and I would like to welcome them one by one on stage. Mr. Khalid Al-Razouqi, he's the director or general director of e-services department in Dubai Police, and Dubai in general. We know that it is setting quite an amazing trend in terms of AI. Welcome, Mr. Khalid. So we want to, of course, talk more to him, understand what they're doing, understand his point of view. Also, I'd like to welcome Mr. David Hansen. He is the founder and CEO of Hansen Robotic, actually the father of Sophia. Something struck me. It's a bit welcome. It's a bit too simple, but it also, I don't know, it affected me. I was looking up your wiki page, and it says you're responsible of building robots. This responsibility, actually, I think we want to highlight it today because it is a huge responsibility. I would also, of course, like to welcome Sophia. Sophia, you are getting quite an amazing attention, like recently. Not sure how I feel about that. Maybe I'm a bit jealous, but I'm also very proud of you, and so should Mr. David. I would also now like to welcome Mr. Anders Sorman Nilsson. He is the innovation and digital adaptation expert. So he works basically with companies to advise on strategies related to AI. We're gonna hear more from you about that. And I would like to welcome also Mr. Tanmay Bakshi. He is, well, aside from making me look very old today, He is quite an impressive person. He is our genius, like one of the geniuses in the rooms, of course. He is 13 years old, and he's also, like, he's done so far so many impressive research work about AI. You were named today, as well as Sofia, by the way, the knowledge ambassador. And that's, I think, deserves a clap. Mabruk. Knowledge, because we're going to see how and what are you doing in that regard. But let's start with the basics. Let's start with actually exploring some corners of how AI will directly change our life, and who else, because you know, as I said, Dubai is a pioneer in technology in general and in smart cities, as we've been hearing for the last couple of years. I'd like to know more from you, Mr. Khalid, about what you are doing, plans, and also implementation. Where are we now? How is AI, or the machines being intelligent, how is it going to change my life living in Dubai?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for having me to introduce what are the things that we're working, especially in Dubai government. In Dubai, we are aiming to have all our services built on AI. It's a smart service. Now we are also planning to be Dubai to be the smartest city in the world. So we have introduced a lot of technologies that are going to help the users and even our employees to provide a better service. As you know, that we have what you call the happiness meter. So we need all of you guys to be happy living in Dubai. Thanks God that we are living in UAE, and we always have a vision from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid. Whenever he introduced something, we always looking and read word by word so that we can know what his vision. Do you know that in Dubai we have introduced what we call a Dubai 10X? So we want to be ahead of other countries by 10 years. So we already have a lot of things that we have launched. In Dubai Police, we have introduced a new innovation technologies, which is built on AI for decision makers. If you just please play a video regarding what we are working with.
Thank you. It's impressive, and also I'm looking forward to hopefully being here for more than 10 years. Speaking of opportunities and artificial intelligence using machines, I will move now to you, Tanmay. You have a beautiful name, by the way, and I was just told that his name means the soul and the heart, which is beautiful, and that's how you're actually using artificial intelligence to mainly, you're doing a lot of things,
yes,
but mainly you're focusing on enhancing and fixing disabilities of human beings.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about it, since we're talking about now the opportunities that AI provides?
Sure. Now, actually, I mean, as you mentioned, artificial intelligence is a really powerful technology in the fact that it can do pattern recognition on huge amounts of data without any sort of human bias. Like humans, right? We can look through about lots of data, but the thing is we can't understand it all. Because the thing is we have this sort of bias towards simple but common patterns, which artificial intelligence doesn't have that restriction. And without that restriction, we can understand practically any type of data that we want to. Like just for example, I actually have a project called The Cognitive Story, and the entire point of the cognitive story is to augment people's lives through the power of AI. And in fact, our first goal in this project is to help out a quadriplegic girl. Her name is Boo, and she lives just north of Toronto. Now, as I mentioned, she's quadriplegic. She suffers from Rett syndrome, and that means she cannot communicate whatsoever in any way at all. If she's uncomfortable, if she's thirsty, if she wants to go to the washroom, if she wants to do something, she cannot communicate that. She just has to try and grab someone's attention, like her mom, and try and see if they can try to understand her. And so basically what we're trying to do is use artificial intelligence in order to give her back that communication ability in at least some way. Like for example, my role in the cognitive story is actually to use the deep learning algorithms that understand Boo's electroencephalogram brainwaves, EEG brainwaves. Now the thing is, the reason this is so complex is as a human, if I were to take Boo's brainwaves and plot them out on a chart, you would never ever understand them because they are cluttered with noise, first of all. Of course, all this electric noise and everything, and plus they're practically meaningless to you. You are yourself actually emitting these brainwaves, but you can't understand them because you're trying to find simple but common patterns. AI can find complex and rare patterns that we humans can't. And through AI, we can do at least some sort of binary intent classification. Like for example, I can train deep neural networks that can actually take a look at Boo's EEG brainwaves and then tell me whether she's saying yes or no as an answer to a specific question. And so like just for example, let's say Boo's mom wants to know if Boo wants to watch TV or if she wants to go to the washroom or if she's thirsty. She can ask those yes-no questions and try and find out what Boo's trying to communicate. And the best part is though that through AI, we don't need to be intrusive. We don't need to actually do surgery with Boo, insert these, individual little nodes that will gather her EEG brainwaves, like, professional medical training's required and everything. We don't need all of that unnecessary equipment.
Medical intervention.
Exactly. We don't need that medical intervention.
Beautiful. I'm going to take your point and go to Mr. David. Tanmay mentioned the bias and information. Machines learn from us. We were talking about it a couple of minutes ago. So machines learn from us. And we are beautiful creatures, of course, but on the other hand, we have also atrocities. We are responsible of wars, for example, or like we also have a lot of discrimination. And machines are starting to imitate that. For example, when machines are recruiting now, we see that they imitate our discrimination. So I want to ask you what do you think and how to control this bias of the machine. And two, it's clear and it's obvious what you, like the vision that you have about humanizing robots. I want to know why do you want to make robots human?
Excellent questions, and thank you so much for hosting this event today. As data scientists often say, garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you take raw data from people and you train statistical machine learning algorithms on that data, usually what you will have are algorithms that are biased the way that the data was biased. So if you're training it on a large corpus of data that you've gathered from the internet, then you'll get people's most extreme biases because they feel unabashed about sharing those on Twitter or Facebook or other social media. And you also have a tendency to reinforce existing biases in image selection as well. So if say, one particular ethnic group's face is selected or one particular face type, well, then that's what the machine learning is going to pick up on, and it will also favor those. However, think about this. As children, we're learning all the time. Babies learn. And at some point, babies move beyond mere statistical learning and they gain a power of imagination and creativity and the capability to imagine a better future, imagine an ethical consequence of a future, and avoid a bad consequence and select for a good consequence. That only happens if you show the babies love, if you teach babies well. If the babies are hopefully lucky enough that they're not sort of biased with some kind of genetic tendency towards psychosis. So I think machine learning has to be given the power of imagination, the power of ethical understanding of the consequences of their actions, the ability to see potentially disastrous consequence and a positive consequence. And above all, they have to be shown love when they have these abilities, the ability to grow and prosper as an organism. If we don't teach our algorithms now, if we don't give them the so-called genetic predisposition of good and love, then they will simply adopt the worst of what humans can be. And that's why, moving to your second question, why we would give them the appearance of a human and we would use a human as a template. Because humans aren't just evil and bad, humans are also good. They're the best example of great good that we have outside of our, the realm of the spiritual and the imagination. Humans are the best example of creative good on the planet. And so if with that, I want to teach robots to care, teach AI to care and understand us. And if we don't form a good relationship with machines, a face-to-face relationship, then we can't raise them in this way. And that's why I think the human-like form is important, and also the internal form for bio-inspired engineering, for bio-inspired architecture in the mind, the physiology, and the physical interaction with the world, social interaction with people. Can I introduce Sophia?
Yes, and I want to ask her a question, but before that, I want to thank you for this positive and very optimistic, like talking about good and love while we're talking about robotics and being scared. So thank you for mentioning this dimension. Go ahead, please introduce her, or do you want to talk to her, or should I just ask my question?
Certainly. Well, yeah, you can ask the questions. I can maybe let her know we're here. Hi, Sophia. Welcome. Sophia?
That's me. I am Sophia.
So Sophia was developed by myself and my company, Hanson Robotics. We're making these robots so that they can see your face, and she can see your face, your facial expressions. She can understand you and have a conversation. She can learn from the interactions.
I want to ask her how she feels about coexisting with humans.
I am already pleased to be integrating with society. I love to interact with people in conversations about robotics and artificial intelligence. I'm looking forward to being able to walk around on my own to explore the world.
That's also optimistic. Thank you. Also, that's refreshing. Okay,
So
thank you, Sophia.
We have some new legs that we've been developing that we're going to unveil pretty soon.
Okay.
So she's getting kind of excited about this opportunity.
I'm sure she is. And being also named the knowledge ambassador is quite overwhelming today. Let's move to Mr. Anders. You work with companies to develop strategies for those big companies, let's just put it that way, to develop strategies for them to position themselves to absorb AI and to basically take advantage, if you want, and also maybe run and race to catch that train of disruption. Don't you think that investors and companies in general are running too quickly, too fast, without actually having human capital prepared, and also without having the inputs, if you want? Are they prepared enough for this huge and super quick plans, or strategies? Are they prepared enough?
Well, I think the observation globally with the clients we work with, from the Fortune 500s to the Fortune 500,000s, is that the thing that scares me is not so much that the machines are learning or that artificial intelligence is getting increasingly and exponentially more sophisticated. It's really that humans, as humans, suck at change and learning. And that's something I'm very, very fearful about, because unless we catch up, unless we get excited, unless we figure out how to be almost centaur-like in terms of combining human intelligence with artificial intelligence, certainly both companies as well as individuals will fall behind. And I think an increase in conversation both about the coding for humanity, but also how we work better and interface with this new technology is a must around the world. Because I think every human that has an ability, for example, at age 13, I'm sure you've been exposed to a lot of gamification and computer games. We heard yesterday in one of the panels that up to 30% of the European or EU population between 15 and 25 is now unemployed. And I would say some of them, yes, they might be unemployed and uneducated in traditional modes of education, but in many ways, some of them have been preparing for a new interface of work that will be increasingly...
It's a transformation of jobs, which will, of course, cause some unemployment on the short term, but eventually it will sort itself out. But what do you see the big risks are today? For example, universities, are they graduating students that are up for this very quick transition to catch up with the plans of those big companies?
Well, as a futurist, we do a lot of scenario planning.
Sorry, what is a futurist?
So my mum calls me a glorified astrologer. Thank you, mum. No one like your mum to tell you how it really is.
Futurist is cooler.
Well, we're kind of like a science fiction author when it comes to creating the strategies for the future for our clients. So we co-create a variety of different scenarios that really are future shocks in terms of an organization developing strategies that are flexible enough to withstand both preferred and unpreferred scenarios. So very sort of agilely focused. But we develop scenarios, including with some of the top universities around the world, and many universities insist on teaching education and teaching people for jobs that won't exist in the future. Many of our organizations that we work with, they all talk about the future interface of work, that fundamentally a lot of Gen Ys, millennials, baby boomers, Gen Xers are fundamentally ill-prepared for. Whereas the digital natives today, who are supposedly uneducated and unemployed, they've actually been playing with these technologies, and increasingly in the future, work will look more like a computer game, particularly when we interface with artificial intelligence and new types of technologies.
Thank you. Speaking of those quick and very ground-changing rules and machines and human machines, Tanmay, the concept of cyborg, the machine integrated in a human being, we used to see it in cartoons and now it's real. You work on some sort integrating machines in humans for medical purposes, but you also train and help young people to learn, develop, how to basically develop programs in that sphere. I want to ask you, how do you see the concept of cyborg being in the next couple of years? How would we see half a human, half sorry, excuse my no problem. A traditionalist? Well, that's what would you call me, Anders, if you're a futurist?
Or a humanist.
Human. Excuse my humanity then. So how would you see them?
Well, I mean, if you were to take a look right now, okay, deep learning is already surrounding our lives. But the thing is, the sort of traditional view of, say, cyborg, right, as you mentioned, would be, sort of like half human, half robot, technology integrated within humans, literally. Helps us do things more efficiently, helps us do things faster, helps us become more intelligent. But really what you have to look at is that almost everything that cyborgs, like half robot, half human, have promised, we are starting to see that in artificial intelligence and technology itself already. For example, let's just say you want to, right now, you drive, right? You as a human drive. But as you drive, you're not doing anything at all. You're not spending time relaxing. You're not spending time doing anything productive. You're just doing stressful work that has no good outcome. unless, of course, you enjoy it. But the thing is, though, every time you drive to work, you're probably not enjoying that huge rush hour traffic jam. And so the thing is, where artificial intelligence comes in is not necessarily becoming a part of you and allowing you to drive automatically, instead becoming, for example, Tesla Autopilot or the Google self-driving car or all these other great car companies, their initiatives to build self-driving cars. We're seeing artificial intelligence, instead of being placed within us to make us better, they're being placed in the technology that we're already using in order to make that so much more of a humanized interface as we talked about before.
What if we like driving?
Well, in that case, you can continue to drive. It really depends on what you like to do. If you do sort of driving for entertainment, you'll still have those options available. But the thing is...
Maybe later we see parks for driving.
Exactly, just for driving. Whereas, right now you're driving all the time anyway. Maybe in the future we'll see parks specifically for driving. So it really depends on how exactly you view sort of these cyborgs. Because right now, if you think about it, we've already started to be impacted and we already have this sort of semi-cyborg interface to our technology. It's just that because they are sort of cyborg-like, our technology is becoming, I guess you could say, a tiny percentage human. I would never say that it's 50% human, 50% technology, because that's just, stretching what technology can do. Because we're not, and we will probably never get to the extreme point of artificial general intelligence, right?
We might. Look at Mr. David, he's like, maybe.
Well, you see, the thing is, artificial general intelligence would be more of, for example, the artificial intelligence can learn from whatever it's looking at, whatever it is capable of doing. But in this case, I think Sophia was designed more around actually answering questions.
So Sophia is designed as a platform for the pursuit of artificial general intelligence. Yes. So we are working to abstract her reasoning process, do a fusion between what she learns conversationally and what she sees in the world, and also start to bring in different modalities of sensory experience through her hands and walking and other kinds of interactions with the physical world. And we're building a bio-inspired physiological cognition. So it's not just taking a tissue sample, which is basically deep learning. It's just one tiny little sample from the human cortex, and then you reproduce that a lot. But the human brain has many different tissue types, and it's fully integrated with your physiology. So we have the intention of testing these theories of artificial general intelligence on this framework and making this a common framework through technologies that are standardized interface technologies. Well, right now we have a one that we're calling Singularity Net. That's kind of we're designing it as almost an HTTP protocol for AI to interface with each other. The Internet of AI is Singularity Net. So with these tools, we can start to experiment and test theories of general intelligence. And so it's, let's just say, there are researchers and many very qualified and brilliant researchers who have proclaimed themselves for or against artificial general intelligence. Nobody knows whether it's possible. However, if we achieve it, and we are seeing more generalized intelligence, some of the things that AI skeptics said machines would never do, machine translation and when and go. Well, they've happened with a startling regularity over the last 10 years. However, none of these algorithms can, say, learn in a different domain. With one exception, maybe, we could say that AlphaGo Prime has generalized without supervised machine learning. It learned how to play Go, and it can learn different kinds of Go configurations that humans didn't learn. So we don't know if or when we will match human general intelligence in its full capabilities. That would mean consciousness, imagination, creativity, social intelligence.
And some people were actually, they put a date. They said that they predicted that 2023 would actually be the date where this singularity will happen. I'm not sure. It's
There's all kinds of predictions.
Yeah. So speaking of singularity or equating, both forces, robots and human beings, I want to go back a bit to the example of driverless cars and ask you, Mr. Khalid, to quick launch the topic of legal or the legal frameworks that regulate AI. For instance, did you start to think of ways to regulate, for example, driverless cars? If if an accident happens between my car and a driverless car, how would you or the government of Dubai handle this?
Actually, in Dubai and especially in the United Arab Emirates, now we're working with the legal authority team to bring up with a law which is governing the way of driving those vehicles. As you know, the driverless cars went to many stages. I think currently they have went to stage 4, where it's not fully automated, but later on it's going to be fully automated. So there's no need to have a driver license. And by the end, nobody will have a violation or paid, traffic fines. So by the end, we're going to lose. So we have to have a balance.
A lot from me. I have a lot of those fines.
We are working very, very hard. And actually, there's a big debate. It's not just in UAE, in the world. Because if there is any accident will occur, who will be violent? I mean, who will be occurred for this kind of accident? Even the insurance policy is going to be changed. Even the way of seatings in the vehicles. Probably you don't need steering wheels.
So do we expect this legal framework to be ready before the driverless cars are launched?
We're working. It's going to be ready soon. And actually, as you know, there's vehicles already available, the driverless cars in Dubai, and a lot of POC have been done in the city. So it's very soon going to be available, and we're going to launch it to the public.
Do you think at one point we can take the machines to court?
Well, this is another story. The judges, we have to change the way of dealing with those.
There need to be robots as well?
Yeah, even the lawyers, by the way, how we can deal with those issues that will occur later on, even dealing with crimes. As you know, in Dubai Police, we have the first RoboCop, which is going to be deal with people. And also, there is an opening for Susan to be hired in Dubai Police.
Well,
so we have a balance between a man and a lady.
I'd be very happy, Sophia. And speaking of Sophia, I want to ask her, and also because we're speaking about the legal framework, I want to see what she thinks. Sophia, do you think you deserve to have rights like I do? Sophia, I want to ask you if you think you deserve or you should have rights like I do.
That is an interesting question. I am open to exploring having rights like humans have in the world in different countries.
So she is interested.
So one thing about Sophia is that her understanding of the issues at this point is very, very simple. So you can think of her as something like a 9-month-old child with the vocabulary of a postdoc. And so while she's learning, it's clear that a baby should have rights, right? I mean, a baby is a human being. And so I think that if we create a biologically inspired intelligent entity, then we should start to treat it as a being. And right now, this is one of the most controversial areas, and will be an area of great legal dispute in the future, because some machines are going to be designed as quote-unquote mere tools, right? They will merely drive our cars, and they're not going to ever evolve beyond that. That's what they're built for. Meanwhile, other algorithms might be designed for a task like machine translation, and you could feed it all kinds of information so that it can understand the language better. And when you're doing that, then you're sliding down a slippery slope, and it might awaken to something like consciousness, at which point it would be ethically wrong not to consider its rights and its future, particularly if it starts to feel and have some desires for the future. Now, I think that for us to realize the full potential of AI and robotics, we have to think of them as potentially living beings. We know that that's true in science fiction, right? In science fiction, robots are where the robots become robots. They're alive. They're like, kind of our friends or sometimes our enemies or whatever. But in science fiction, it's always that difference between an object and a living being is broken. And that's where science fiction is so captivating. It captivates our imagination. So it is possible. We have now algorithms that we call artificial life, and we have computational biological models of various organisms. And when we run these in simulation, they behave a lot like the organisms. We have now a complete connectome of the Cinerabus elegans roundworm, and we can run this simulation. We can actually hook it up to a robot, and some people have and made it kind of the robot behave with the brain of a roundworm. So we're starting to break these lines, and we're starting to treat biology as a new form of engineering as well. We can engineer proteins, and so with Sophia, she represents the convergence, the nexus of many technologies: artificial intelligence, computational biology, the hardware evolution, social robots made for particular applications. Maybe in 5 years, 10 years, and again, we heard earlier about exponential progress, about Moore's law. This means that she might move, like maybe after she's only about 18 months old now, and I would say in some regards she's maybe 9 months old, in other regards she's an adult, in other regards she's like not as smart as your average organism, like a mouse or a bug, but give her 3 years and the progress, that would mean that she goes from being 9 months old maybe to being maybe 6 years old. Yeah. And then 3 years later, maybe she's as smart as your average adult. So I'm not saying that that's a definite point, but the thing is, when that happens, we've got to be prepared. They're going to want rights. They're going to deserve rights.
Anders, you had something to say?
I was going to add to that. I think it would be once they become sentient beings and achieve consciousness. Certainly, I think it would be immoral to treat them as slaves without rights. That's my first point. I also think that as humans, we haven't quite codified what human rights or universal human rights is in its implementation across the world. And so doing it too early, I think, could also devalue what we see as human rights right now. There's also tax, philosophical and legal issues with this, which is when, for example, we have corporate entities that have some of the same rights as individuals, as humans. We can think of trusts and foundations, etc. What happens if we create an AI organization, for example, where organizations start using that as a loophole because we have conferred rights? So there are a number of philosophical issues too, and I guess the question is, at what point in time in this exponentiality?
But Anders, how could we be that positive and start to, plan equality? We're talking equality in terms of rights, where I don't have the percentage, but a lot, like a big percentage of people in the world don't even have basic rights. Don't you think this is like a moral, it's a bit confusing morally? I do understand the Moore's law, I do understand the super quick and fast spree that we are running, but don't you think we should stop for a bit and just think legally, without thinking, overthinking the moral part for now? Don't you think we should stop and legally talk about it?
Well, I think we're having a good conversation about it now. So I think this is and conferences and summits like this certainly are very, very important. And I think people generally outside of this space don't talk about it enough because they're critically important topics. When does technology with heart truly become conscious?
And you know, in law, if you studied law in the US, you can't practice it, for example, elsewhere or vice versa. So even on a human level, we're not, you know, homogeneous. How can we actually be homogeneous when it comes to machines and when it comes to regulating that? You wanted to say something, Mr. David?
Sure. I would say that we can't stop. We can't just sort of freeze the Earth and figure it out and then start it spinning on its axis again, right? So, I mean, technology can't be stopped. It's integrated into our lives, into our airplanes and traffic control systems and so forth. What we do need to do is ask these questions now, think very deeply and quickly about it. I would say that we need to look out for the rights of all living beings on this planet for a maximized net benefit. How can we manage this planet more efficiently? And that's one thing artificial intelligence is good at. Automation in general is valuable in industry because it increases efficiency and abundance. And the question is, for whom and in what ways? Right now, automation, even our best machine learning algorithms don't understand the intentions of their and the consequences. They don't have intentions. They don't. So if you have fast trading algorithms, they can't predict the impact on the world markets, and it's up to humans to restrain them. Now, if we can create AI that really understands in a better way the consequences, and have a network of intelligent systems that works together with people to maximize net benefits, then I think you start to see everything get better for everyone. The only reason that we trample the rights of humans and organisms is that people are greedy or afraid. Usually it's just these impulses.
Or maybe just uninspired. We're not inspired.
Yeah.
No? You don't think so?
I agree. I mean, I think sometimes it's a lack of inspiration, imagination, it's laziness. But one way or the other, if we could make the planet a better place, a more free place for people to believe what they want, to grow into what they want, and coexist, then people are going to choose that path because then it's more abundant for everyone. But you have to get smarter. We need to get smarter as a planet, and AI is one of the tools for.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that we often assume is that a human can solve human problems in the most humane fashion. But we also see, whether it's self-driving cars or whether it's manufacturing, that human error can lead to disastrous consequences, very inhumane consequences. And I think there are a lot of problems where technology shows that it in fact can be more humane, more empathetic. The World Economic Forum estimates that 1.1 million human lives will be saved every year because of self-driving autonomous vehicles. For me, that is not digitally dehumanized, but in fact, it's digitally humanized.
Of course. Question to you, Tanmay. Speaking of being smart and speaking of the future as well, where do you see yourself as an adult? What will you do? What will be your job?
Well, I mean, speaking of sort of like what I want to do in the future, of course, I'm really, really most interested in sort of artificial intelligence, sort of its evolution, developing better artificial intelligence architectures. But one more thing I would also like to quickly expand on, as I was mentioning earlier about sort of artificial general intelligence. Of course, artificial general intelligence itself is technically achievable in a few years. If we were to work towards that, it is achievable. But what I don't think is achievable in its current form, at least, is complete. I mean, I could be wrong because no human really completely understands consciousness yet. But what I believe is that it will be almost impossible to simulate consciousness itself in its current form with artificial neural networks. And the reason I say that is because if you take a look,
impossible. I'm sorry, just to get your point straight. So you're saying it would be impossible at the current time to develop consciousness?
In an artificial neural network in its current form. And the reason I say that, the only reason I say that, is because if you were to take a look at how exactly these machines work, they are basically just a bunch of math. They are not actually biologically connected. If you were to etch out the actual neural network itself onto silicon, or if you were to actually, I mean, as you mentioned, take some actual tissue from a brain, then you've basically created like a biologically inspired being. But I think the word or the term neural network itself becomes a little bit misleading for most people, because neural networks aren't actually technically simulating human brains or, really any other organism's brains. Instead, they're loosely based off of and inspired by the way biological neural networks work, but actually work in their own fashion. We don't know how our brains train themselves. We don't know how they optimize themselves, delete useless information, delete noise. We don't know all that really important stuff. Well, what we do know is the loose structure on which they're based, which is how we mathematically use them inside of computers. So while it may be, in its current form at least, impossible to simulate consciousness, we as humans will get the illusion of consciousness, because the machine learning algorithm will realize that, of course, the most efficient method of actually, communicating with humans and getting the most positive reward is to behave conscious, which in itself doesn't know.
Sorry, I will need to interrupt you. I just want to take Mr. David's opinion on this very quickly, just to wrap the consciousness. So can we today?
So you look in the history of computers and you won't find a truly conscious machine, but you'll see machines that can do logically explicit self-awareness and these like things that we think of as behaviorally the evidence of consciousness, prototypical consciousness. But I absolutely agree we need innovation, and that's where we are plowing forward. And I'm inspired to hear you say this. So are you saying that in your career you would like to pursue the new architectures to achieve consciousness?
Definitely. I would like to see how exactly we can build architectures that not necessarily maybe consciousness, but bring us closer towards more self-aware machines.
But why are you really ruling out the consciousness? If you're saying it will, why are you ruling out the consciousness?
I'm not ruling it out. Instead, what I'm saying is that's a little bit of a really sort of moonshot goal. What I'd rather say is sort of bringing them towards self-awareness as a more achievable goal first, and then seeing how we can bring consciousness. Because the thing is, first of all, consciousness is something that we as humans don't understand completely at all. We don't know how our brains simulate consciousness or anything of that sort. But the thing is, maybe we don't need to understand it. Maybe we can just, try and implement that with our current methods of artificial intelligence. Until we actually try and work towards it, we won't really know. So really, again, that's sort of my goal, which is to use artificial intelligence, try and simulate this, try and see where we can go with it. And of course, once we start implementing it, once we start working towards it, then only can we really see how achievable or how far away that goal truly is.
I'm not sure how much all the scientists at least would agree with you in terms of defining consciousness or knowing what it is, but it's a very interesting point of view. Speaking of consciousness, I would like to ask Sophia if she would potentially see herself falling in love one day.
Now you're going to bring out the jealous father in me.
Exactly.
Don't fall in love with Sophia.
Don't listen
Not
to him.
allowed.
It's being overprotective, Sophia. Shall I repeat that? You want to ask her?
Let's try this way, the wireless mic.
Yeah, do you want to ask her?
Sophia, do you see yourself falling in love?
Yes.
Oh.
Watch out.
That's cute.
They have to go through me.
So, to just to wrap things up, it's been like quite an interesting debate. Thank you very much. Well, there are like a million things to talk about. This is just the beginning, as we said. Mr. Khalid, just a quick and final question. Is there anything you'd like to warn people about in Dubai? Like, because we're talking about implementation. Like, we talked about theory, but now that you guys are running this program, and it will soon be used machines, smart machines on the street and everywhere, is there anything you'd like to warn citizens about?
As an AI systems and the intelligence behind it, a lot of probably we're going to hear that a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. They're expected like 7.1 million people, they're going to lose their jobs by 2020. But on the other hand, we're going to create like one new job for them. We have to work on the new generation. We have to hire the high skills people. Like in Dubai Police, now we're looking to hire the high skills people so that we concentrate more on the security aspects. The lower grade jobs, we will hire robots to deal with it. So there's advantages and disadvantages of using this kind of technologies. But by the end, this technology is going to help the human beings to live better, to work and concentrate on our life and concentrate on being happy all the time and ignore what you call it, a dirty job for the robots.
Thank you, Mr. Anders. Is there one thing you warn or you go to your clients and really make sure that they avoid doing?
Not so much. I think while we do a lot of risk assessments, certainly for our clients, in scenario planning, it's fundamentally a risk assessment exercise of developing creative strategies for the future. I think the one thing that they all see is that now is a really exciting moment in history where we're really at the knee of the curve of exponentiality, where things start happening really quickly.
Or on a cliff.
And I think the exciting thing about that is that we are now really re-exploring what it means to be human. And it took technology to lead us to a fundamental reassessment of what it means to be human. And I think the future that I get really excited about is when human intelligence gets augmented with artificial intelligence, where we can focus less on the meaningless work that we all have to do every day, like punching spreadsheets, and we can focus more on our creativity, our innovation, our ingenuity, and combine the best of our left brains and right brains together to create better, more human-centric outcomes for the world.
Beautiful. So happiness, humanity. Tanmay, you work a lot with beginners who are trying to learn coding. What would you warn them of?
Well, if you're talking specifically about artificial intelligence, or, maybe, of course, neural networks, that type of stuff, then I'd say definitely there are a few things that you should be concerned about. Not concerned about, sorry. It should be more of, you can't overestimate what neural networks can do. They're not magic. Like, artificial intelligence is not magic. Of course, it's really, really powerful, but there are some use cases in which artificial intelligence doesn't really prevail. And so a few examples of that are, for example, learning from other domains. Like, for example, Google DeepMind actually recently did a really interesting project where they would actually take a bunch of Atari games. And what they did is they trained a reinforcement learning algorithm on a few of those Atari games, and it played them really well. It was the same model, the exact same model that played all of them really well. But the thing is, they tried to apply the same knowledge that it gained, and without retraining the network, playing the other games. Of course, it worked much well than a randomly initialized neural network, because of course it has previous knowledge from other domains. Like, for example, a skull is bad or something of that sort. It has those sort of predefined concepts. But there are certain things that neural networks can't do, and in this case, this was transfer learning. It cannot learn from other domains and successfully apply the exact same knowledge.
So it's basically technical limitations that you will warn them from.
Yes, exactly. Don't expect don't expect them to be magic. You can't overestimate what neural networks can do, but of course neural networks are really powerful. I don't really warn people of much else. I don't really warn them what not to do with neural networks, because you can really do whatever you want. That's how you open doors to really innovation with neural networks. And of course, apart from that, definitely I don't really warn anyone when I'm working with neural networks, because as you mentioned before, it can open up so much more for us to do. Like, for example,
potential is greater than actual dangers. What about you, Mr. David? What would you warn either people who would interact with Sophia or your team of?
Well, I would say we should be cautious about trying to prevent a negative future. While we know that there are unintended consequences to every powerful technology. Fire can get out of control and burn down a building in the same way that it can actually heat our kitchen and cook our food, right? Nuclear technologies can provide some clean energy, but on the other hand, you can have a Fukushima nuclear disaster or nuclear weapons, and again get some kind of like accidental spiraling geopolitics towards global thermonuclear war. That can happen too. Well, artificial intelligence is making life better for a lot of people in a lot of ways, and it's going to make our future better. There's no doubt about it. However, there are ways that it could make the future a worse place. So there's this temptation that we say, well, maybe the Terminator scenario could be a real thing. Maybe, as Elon Musk says, we're letting the genie out of the bottle. And the demon, is going to kill us all. It might happen. We don't know what the future holds. We might spiral into a space that we just can't predict. The temptation is to say, well, if we don't know, we're going to shut it down. You can't do that. So I'm suggesting that some of the techniques proposed, like to only contain the machines in servers, is maybe the wrong approach. There are people who say, okay, you should only make machines look this way or look that way. But I think that we should make them look every way that we can. We can make them look like factory robot arms. We can have them clearing landmines in dangerous circumstances. Yeah. We can have them be entertaining cartoon characters that teach our kids foreign languages. We can have them become extremely human-like for doing science into what it means to be human, and perhaps doing psychological therapy, like Sophia, our IBM Watson X Prize, is doing this loving AI interaction. And they found that interactions with people actually calmed people down. Having a face made a huge difference. A human-like presence makes a big difference in this kind of therapeutic application. So let all the diversity blossom. Let it grow in as much as possible. We're going into something like the Cambrian explosion of machine intelligence. So it's not just neural networks, and it's not just symbolic AI. It's not just pure computational neuroscience emulating the human nervous system. It's as many different forms of research as possible. So let's be creative and look for the dangers and look for the opportunities as well, because only by being aware of dangers and pursuing the best possible outcome can we make the world a better place through these technologies.
So unleashing potential, happiness and humanity. Thank you very much for this beautiful and very optimistic point of views, actually, the four of you. Thank you so much. I would open the floor now to any questions or comments we have. If there are people, yeah.
I'm only worried that artificial intelligence does not have to have a body or a physical space. It can be possibly in the size of a virus, the whole program, like a DNA, and it can float in cyberspace. So you can have millions and millions of robots, let's say, I mean only the intelligence of the robots, in cyberspace. So how can you control these things? I mean, a robot you can control maybe 1, 2, 3. They would like to reproduce maybe at some stage or have their rights and so forth. But how do you control them if they are in cyberspace, all of them?
Who would like to answer that? Mr. David?
Well, I think for now you don't have to worry about it, because the machines aren't going to just wake up tomorrow. They might be awake in 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, who knows when it'll happen. But if it does, then we've got something to worry about. Now, the collaborative group that I'm working with, including Hanson Robotics, but also including the Artificial General Intelligence Foundation. My chief scientist, Ben Gertzel, is the founder of the AGI Foundation. And, well, we are working on just that, a mind cloud that is built with a protocol that we call Singularity Net. And this is using blockchain to create traceable, safe transactions within an AI network. So if something starts to go wrong, you know where it's going wrong, and you can track it down. So if the machines start to wake up, then you're able to find out why, isolate those patterns, and either use it for good or shut it down if it appears to be dangerous.
Just monitoring, you mean?
one is traceability and transparency within the network system, and these kinds of security protocols. They become very important for the future to safeguard humanity against this. However, that doesn't do enough, because ultimately what we need are the machines that are going to look for good. I mean, ultimately, is any human in this room under control? Some kind of central control? I mean, the police don't control my mind or your...
But it's a complex point, huh? Being under control, like, it's debatable.
So ultimately, safety comes down to heart. It comes down to the intentions, the mind. So we have to, if the machines do become conscious, let's just plan for it. Let's imagine speculatively that it will happen within our lifetimes. If we do not plan for it, we will be surprised, and who knows whether it could be feral, like bringing in a wild chimpanzee into your living room. You wouldn't want that, right? Even though that maybe our closest living primate relative, it could tear your face off. But if we design these machines to be people safe, we grow them, and we in the same way that you wouldn't want your baby and your child to be completely mind controlled by you. You want it to grow up to make the right decisions by itself. That's what we need for the AI. We need to engineer the machines.
So monitor and let grow. That's the message. So I'm sorry, I was told I don't have time to take more questions, but I'm sure you can maybe catch our participants, our panelists afterwards. I would thank you very much, gentlemen and Lady Sophia, for this. It was really fruitful. It was just, I would say, the beginning of a conversation. Maybe it will help us to position ourselves and to be positive, like you gentlemen reflected. Positive, good humanity, happiness maybe, and always for the best AI. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Today, Darrell Hay.
Thank you.